on the student view are coming from the COE, so maybe those pieces,
Okay.
it's good for them to know how they got there.
Okay. So let's take a look at it. All right, so this is MIS2000. I'm going to guess that most of you guys are already familiar with it, but I'm going to, I guess, approach it as if you haven't seen it before. So MIS2000 is your database software that lets you manage and keep track of your migrant students. So we have two main entities of data in MIS2000. There's the student and there's the COE. So we're currently looking at student data. You can use the view menu to move between the different types of data. So we're currently on student. So in the top panel of the app, you see the demographic data for the student that you're working with. And you can navigate to different students using the arrow buttons. And you can search for students using the search. If you have a name or an ID number, you can search using those. So if I had an ID number, I could just type it in. And find my student, and then I can just select child or double click to pull up that student. Then other things here, you can delete students from the database if they shouldn't be there for some reason. You're more likely to do that from the COE view, but if for some reason you did need to delete a student, you could do that here. And that's going to be universal in MIS2000. The minus sign is always going to delete stuff. So whatever you're working with, if you poke on that minus sign, it's going to delete that type of thing. Then the check mark and X are also universal across MIS2000. The check mark will save changes that you've made, and the X will cancel them. If you needed to edit a student's name, you can click on Edit Name and update the spelling of their name if it is incorrect or something needs to change there. All of the fields in MIS2000 are some like drop downs, or you could just type in a value. Now some of them are calculated, so age, you're never going to actually type in an age on any panel in MIS2000 because you've provided the date of birth, so we just calculate the age of the student today. So if the student was to turn 19 tomorrow their age would show as 19. Then some of your drop downs are a little more complicated. So for example, the race drop down, you can select one or more, and when you do, it will update and show all of the races and ethnicity there. So this is information about the student themselves, and you can find their ID number in the right-hand corner. Students can have more than one ID. If they do, you can use the arrow buttons to scroll and see all the different IDs for that student. So the middle panel is going to be the data that you're working with for that kid. So right now we're working with school history. And these are your enrollments. So for every term, that's every type of enrollment that a student has each year, you'll be creating a new enrollment for them. So let's say if they moved last year, they don't have a new COE, so there's no new move. You'll each fall when the school begins, you'll create a new enrollment a new school history record for each student who's still present in your district or service area. And to do that, you'll use the plus sign. Again, like I said, the plus sign creates new things. So since we're working with school history, when I click on the plus sign, it's going to create a new enrollment. So by default, it's going to use the school that they were last enrolled in. If they are attending a different school, you can just change it using the drop down. You know, if any of the other information that's been pre-populated from the prior enrollment, like the district of residence, if any of that's changed, you can just change it. Then you'll need to enter an enrollment date. That's the date that they're enrolling in school. If they're not attending school, if they're like an out-of-school youth or an underage student, then of course they're not enrolling in school, but you can still enter like the date on which their residency, you know that they were residing in the state. So it would represent kind of an enrollment in the migrant program. So we'll say 10-3. Now, when you're doing this in the fall, you're not going to have a withdraw date just yet. So you're going to leave that empty. And you're going to come back at the end of the school year next year. And you'll enter the rest of the information that you don't have now. So we'll just go through all of the fields on the school history record and enter the information that we have now. And then the rest of it will be entered at the end of the term. So we'll do our enrollment type, and your folks there at the state can help you, you know, help you determine which enrollment types you should be using for different situations. Then we'll use our grade. And days enrolled and days present, I'll just skip over because those are things that would be entered at the end of the school year. And the rest of these are just flags. So if the student's priority for service, we'll flag them as priority for service. If they're EL or LAP, we'll flag them there. If they have an IEP, they have a medical alert, and if their immunizations are available. Now, the term type and date are the termination type and date, and those are those represent when a student is no longer eligible. So when you're creating an enrollment for a kid who is clearly still eligible, you wouldn't enter that. This would be something that you would come back and enter later if the student, you know, graduated or their eligibility ended for some other reason, like they turned 22 or their 3 years expired. You can come in and select the reason and then enter the date on which their eligibility ended. Then you have a dropout date field. Your residency verification date field is useful for cases where a student is attending school and their school year begins prior to the performance period, which is September 1st. You can verify the student's residency after, you know, and enter a residency date that's within the performance period, so that to help with reporting purposes and just to show that you verified that that student has their residency has been verified on that date. So, you know, other dates, you're entering an enroll date, and you'll enter a withdraw date in the spring. So we'll have a lot of dates to see, you know, the student's activity during the year. The last three things here are the Algebra 1 indicator, the out-of-school transcript, and the homeschool flag. You'll notice that some of these fields have an asterisk by them. They're read-only fields. They're coming from the COE, and it's just displayed there for you for informational purposes. So once you've finished entering all the information that you do have, we'll just, we can post the edit using the check mark. And now we have a new enrollment for this fall. So each row here represents an enrollment, and if you needed to edit one for some reason, if I needed, let's say I had to enter a withdraw date for this 2018 enrollment, I can just select the enrollment that I want to edit and then come here and enter a withdraw date. And then post my change, and now I have a withdraw date on there. So this is what you'll do like at the end of the school year when you're entering withdrawals. You'll come in and add a withdrawal date for your kids. As with, everything in MIS2000, if you don't have the information, of course, you don't want to enter something there. So if you don't know a student's withdrawal date, or you don't have a residency verification date, or you don't know if they have an IEP, you'll just leave that field empty because we don't have that information. So you'll fill out what you can and leave the rest blank. Excuse me. Okay, does anybody have any questions about school history and entering enrollments? Okay, I don't see anything in the group chat, and it looks like pretty much everyone is muted, so I'll move on. So we're going to repeat that same process that we just talked about for the summer. So if you have any kids who are attending a summer program, you'll do that same thing for the summer program. So for all of the kids who are attending, you'll use the plus sign to create a new enrollment and enter their enrollment date. And you'll when you do these, you'll want to make sure you flag it as a summer enrollment. So this would be for the case of summer MEP funded projects. You can select that, and then you'll just do the same thing that you did for the regular school year. You'll enter what you have and save that change. So to enter grade. All right, so that's how you will get your enrollments in there. So most of the remaining data that we're going to work with is associated with an enrollment. So the enrollment's the first thing that you'll need to do for your kids for their school history. So let's take a look at the other types of data that are associated with enrollments. So I'm just going to go through the line down here at the bottom of MIS2000 are buttons to change the panel that you're working with. So let's go look at testing data. This would be state assessments. So if a student had state assessments that you needed to enter, you can do that here. And to do so, you'll select an enrollment. So in the right-hand grid over here, you have all of those enrollments from the school history. And they should look familiar. So I have the 2 enrollments that I just created. To add a test, I will just highlight the enrollment that the test was administered during, and then I'll click the plus sign and select the test that the student took from the drop down. Let's try to find one that says grade 11 or something, not grade 5, that's for sure. We'll pick something here. Here we go. And then the code is going to fill in automatically for you. And then you'll enter their score and the date that the test was administered during. This date's a little different than most of the dates in MIS2000. It's going to be a month and a year instead of having an actual day as just a month. And then the interpretation. And once you have that, you'll just post it. And now I have a test associated with the highlighted enrollment. So I'll always know which enrollment that test is linked to. So you would repeat that just for all the tests that a student's taken. So highlight the enrollment that you want to add the test to, click the plus sign, select the test and the score, enter the date it was administered on, and the interpretation. So now I have two tests listed in my left-hand grid. And if I select one of those records, it's going to show me on the right which enrollment's associated with it. So we'll know which enrollment that test was administered during. Cindy asks, are the tests pre-populated from state information? Possibly. I'm not familiar with what imports you guys have in MIS2000 from other systems. Jose can probably answer that. He said yes. So this is something that you may not actually be entering. So you might see data here, but you might not have to actually enter it. So next is health data. This is a place where you can basically enter immunization dates and things, results from vision and hearing exams and such. And there's also a medical alert tab, so you can make comments if the student does have a medical alert. And all of this is just one record per student, and you could just type in the information. Next is supplemental programs. This one you're going to use a lot. It works in the same way that the testing data works. You have two grids. The right-hand grid is all of the enrollments that the student has. The left-hand grid are all of the services, which are your supplemental programs. So when you are adding a new supplemental program, you'll do it in the exact same way as we did the tests. You'll highlight the enrollment that you want to add the service or the supplemental program to. Then you'll click the plus sign and select the program and enter the start date and an end date if you have one. Hours, if that applies to you, and a funding code. So if it's migrant funded, of course you want to select migrant. And we'll just post that. Start date must not be after today. That makes sense. I created an enrollment in the future. So let's cancel this and I'll make one here. Okay. And when I save it, they are okay, here's what's happening. There is a, in the lower right corner, we have an option, or the lower left corner rather, apologize. an option to add the supplemental program to the most recent enrollment. So if you're adding services to any enrollment that's not this most recent one, the one on the top, you have to uncheck this box. So this might be useful for you because in a lot of cases you are going to be adding to the most recent enrollment always, but in my case here, I need to add it to an older enrollment. So I'm going to uncheck that so that I can add my service. All right, so now I've got my two services entered, or my new service entered and my old one, and I can see the services and the enrollment that it's linked to. Now, you will, for every enrollment, you will create new services for all of the, new supplemental programs for all of the services that you provide to your kids. So every year, you're going to have a new enrollment. We're not going to edit old enrollments to make them look like new ones. We always want to create new data because we want to have historical data for these kids. Then you'll enter any services that you've provided. If they received the same service last year, you still need to enter it for the new year and associated with the new year's enrollment. The same goes for summer. If we have, the student receives the same service in the regular school year as they do in the summer, they still need to have that service entered for both the regular school year enrollment and the summer enrollment. So every enrollment has their own services associated with them. The next panel is the parent information, and this is a way that you can update the family's address or the parent information without changing a COE. So you're using electronic COEs, and those are a document that was accurate at the time it was signed. So we don't want to change the information if maybe a name changes or the family moves down the street. It's not a new qualifying move. There's no reason for there to be a new COE. So you can come here and update their address to keep a current record of their address. And it stores it in the database, but it doesn't change the original COE at all. And to do that, you'll click either the family button, and that's going to update the parent information and address for all of the kids in that family, or you can use the student button to update it for just the student that you're working with. All right, the next thing is a credit accrual. So this is the course history for high school students. So all of their credit accrual, the whole history of all of their courses will be here. And it works just like testing data, just like supplemental services. You highlight the enrollment that you need to add a course to. You click the plus sign, select your subject and course, type and section, term type, and then if the course has not been completed, you'll enter clock hours and a grade to date. So this would be for partial credit. If the course has been completed, you'll enter the credits granted and the final grade. So as you're entering these, you'll either fill out the completed courses only section or the partial credit section, depending on the circumstances. Then we'll hit the check mark and save, and now we have our new course entered. So this student has an extensive course history here, and you can see all of that. The last thing here is documents, which is document scanning or attaching files. So if you have an image or a PDF, you can attach a document, or if you have a scanner, you can scan a document. And it's going to associate those documents with this student and will be a part of their MIS2000 record. And you can, scan or attach as many documents as you need to. All right, so we've looked at the student data. Let's take a look now. Just hop over to the COE data, and then we'll take a look at some other things here. All right, so I'm going to use the view menu to navigate to the COE view. The COE view is where all of your COEs are entered. And if you needed to look up a COE for some reason, you can come here to do it. There's a search. So if you have an ID number or family information, whatever you have, you can type it in here and find this COE, just like the student search. We could type in an ID number. And find our COE. Recruiters enter COEs with their tablets, and just like with everything else in MIS2000, they use the plus sign to make them, and then fill out all the different sections of the COE. So we have all of the family information, the qualified move and work section, the children. If there's more than one child on the COE, you'll have more than one student listed in the grid. I'm going to this. Then let's see if we can find one. There's one that has more than one kid. All of the children on the COE are listed here in the grid. And then the last panel are signatures. So this is where the family signs, the recruiter and the reviewer sign, and then the director signs. Now, when working with COEs, they go through an approval process. So when a recruiter creates a COE in MIS2000, they have to submit it for review. And the COE gets reviewed, it looks like a couple of times, by a local reviewer and then by someone at the state. And we keep a log of that review process. So you can click the view log button in the right hand corner to see the review log for the COE. So we can see that this COE was created on November 26th in 2018. And then a couple of days later, on November 30th, it was actually submitted. So I know that because the first line has a status of incomplete, and incomplete is the status that a COE has when a recruiter's created it, but they're not ready for it to be reviewed yet. And then our next record has a status of new, and that same user submitted the COE for review, and which moved it into the status of new on 11/30. Then later that day, we can see that the COE was verified by a local reviewer, and then a few days later was reviewed and then approved at the state level. When you're working with COEs, it is possible to add extra entries into the log that are just comments, and this would be comments about the COE itself, the review of that COE. So you can just type in some extra comments that will get added to the log. And then you can also copy the text of the log to a clipboard if you needed to grab a copy of it for some reason. So when I go back in, I'll see the extra comments that I added at the end here. And these are going to be ordered in, chronological order. So if I had done this somewhere in the middle, it would show up chronologically. All right. So those are the COEs. And those you're not really going to, as you're doing data entry, you're not really going to work with those COEs in this context. That's all done in the context of the recruiter and the reviewer, which some of you may be reviewers, so you may be doing this as well. When you do review COEs, it's done on the COE draft view. So if you are a reviewer, you'll review over here. And any COE that you need to approve is going to show up here, and you'll be able to approve it. So I didn't have any, so I'm just going to click Show All Draft COEs so that we can look at one together and talk about them. Depending on where you're at in the review process, you may need to do some extra things outside of just, reviewing the data and signing. One of you will have the responsibility of searching for students to eliminate duplicates. So when a recruiter completes a COE, they're just typing the student's information. And then as part of the review process, one of the reviewers is tasked with approving each child individually on that COE. So what happens is they'll select a student and they'll approve child for COE, and then they're going to do a search, and they'll try to find if that student has been in the Oklahoma Migrant Education Program before. If they have, they'll find that student in the database already, and they'll link that existing record to the student on the COE and merge that together so that we don't have any duplicates in MIS2000. And that has to be done for each kid on the COE. And once that's done and signatures are all signed that need to be signed, you'll be able to approve the COE. And approving the COE just advances it to the next reviewer. So once it's gone through all the reviewers and the final reviewer approves the COE, then it gets the status of accepted and is considered approved. You do also have options of deleting and rejecting COEs. If you reject a COE, it's going to go back to the recruiter and ownership so they can correct issues with it. And then when they've corrected it, they can submit it again, and it'll start going back through that review process again. So you do have the option here of deleting COEs as well. Things that you delete, students and COEs that you delete specifically. When they're deleted, they go into a delete management queue, and somebody at the state will approve or deny the delete for that COE or student. When you're working with COEs and reviewing them or entering them, there will always be one person who owns a COE. And that owner can be found by looking in the log. We see that this COE is currently owned by Evelyn. And Evelyn will be the only user who can make any changes to the COE. So one person owns it, one person can work with that COE and make changes to it. And then when they submit it or approve it and advance it to the next reviewer, they don't own it anymore and they can't make any more changes to it. So it'll be owned by the next reviewer. All right, so we've looked at those. let's take a look at some of the other features in MIS2000. We've already looked at the view menu. This is how we're navigating between the different views in MIS2000. So if we go to our student view, we can hop over here just using the student view. But you can also use your Go menu. So it works a little bit differently. It also will navigate between your student view and your COE view, but it does it for whoever you have selected. So I'm working with a student here. If I wanted to see this student's COEs, I can use the Go menu and say Go to COEs. And now when I navigate using my arrow buttons up here, I will scroll through only the COEs that are associated with that student. So all of the COEs that he is linked to will be visible here. Likewise, if I'm on a COE and I select a student, I can use the Go menu to go to that specific student. And so this is kind of an alternate to searching. If I already have the student here, I can just go to the student instead of having to search for them over here on the student view. So now I can enter data or work with that student's data. You can change some preferences here. You can have MIS2000 automatically turn caps lock on for you, and you can change some date settings and allow multiple MIS2000s. Next, we have reports. So I'm sure you all have some number of reports in Snap Report, so let's take a look at that. These are going to be reports that have been predefined, so you can select a report and enter filters or dates. Depending on the report, they're going to have different filters and different dates because they're all created for a custom purpose. So your current enrollment report has a description here. It's going to list students who were enrolled on or after the start date that I enter. So I'm going to enter that start date down here in the lower right corner. And who are still eligible today. And then who are not withdrawn or terminated today. So basically it's going to show me any kid who was enrolled today or later and still who has eligibility today. So you could just run this report and it's going to run it for every kid in your database. If you want to limit it to a specific district, you can enter a filter using district code or district name. And to do that, we'll just highlight the field that we want to add a filter for and then choose a comparison. In most cases, you're probably going to use the equal sign, but you do have other options. Less than, greater than, not equal. Is null means that there's no data in the field. It's empty, essentially. Is not null is just the opposite of that. It just means that there is data in there. It's not checking to see what it is, just that there is something. And then between. So you can enter, a range of things. So let's do say we have a district code of 150. Then we'll just click Add Filter. And you'll see at the bottom all of the filters that you've actually applied to the report. So if it doesn't show up down here, you haven't applied it yet. You want to make sure you add filter to see it displayed down here. If you needed to remove a filter, if you had a typo or something, or you just decided you didn't want to use that, you can highlight it, you can remove filter, and start over. All right, so once you have your filters all sorted out, you also want to double check your date range in the lower right corner. Some reports like this one only use a start date. Some reports use a start date and an end date. So it just kind of depends on the report and what it was designed for. When you have all that sorted and you're ready to go, you'll just click Run Report, and it's going to run the report and show you your data. So here we have a current enrollment report, and we can scroll through our pages. It'll show us all of our kids. Then from here you can print it and send it to your printer. You can print it to a PDF. If you want to work with the data in Excel, I recommend going about it in a slightly different way and using the Show Data button. So when I click Show Data, it's going to show me the data that's behind this formatted report. So when we make reports, we produce all of the data and then we format it onto a report. So it looks, has a layout and it looks like we're seeing here. But we can get to the data that's behind that as well by clicking Show Data. And that's what I have here. So if we scroll over, we'll see all of the data for that report. And from here, we can save as file. So if I save as file, I can give it a name and tell it where I want to save it, say my desktop, and save. And that's going to save as a CSV file, which is a comma delimited text file that you can open in Excel. That's another option for saving your data. So all of your reports are going to work that way. When you run them, they may have slightly different filters. Some may have no filters. It just depends on how that report was designed when it was created and what its intended purpose was. Okay, let's look at some more reporting things. There are some potential duplicate student reports that you could run. I don't know that you guys will really use these very much, but it doesn't hurt to run them if you want. Potential duplicate students would be kids who might be duplicated. So we could run it for matching date of birth, and it would show you pairs of students who have the same date of birth. So these aren't definitely duplicates. I mean, they could be twins or something. But they're just suggestions of kids to take a look at that might be duplications. And there are a whole bunch of different ways that you can search. So close date of birth, matching date of birth and last name or first name. Just a bunch of different options there. Only recent records is going to limit the results of that to just that, only recent records. If you uncheck that, it's going to look at all of your historical data. So, I mean, we can go back to, 1982 to see duplicates, which is unnecessary. So we have an option just to look at only recent records. So the last bit of this is working with a student record. So it's just a summary of the student's information. So you can queue a student. So you can say queue, and then you can print out their record later. So if we print their record, it'll just be a summary of that kid's information. And we have the similar thing that I failed to show you over on COE, so we'll hop back over there in a few minutes and I'll show you that, where you can actually print out or save as a PDF the paper COE form, essentially. So here's a student record just showing the summary of that kid's information. So you could print it from here and save that like as a PDF or something. When I close, it's going to ask, it's going to clear or not clear the queue based on my settings. You can queue more than one record. So if you have like 5 kids and you want to print out 5 different records, you can do that. So you can queue up a number of kids and queue them, then print them out later. then we can clear the record queue if we need to. And that just clears out that list. Include health record as an option, and where you can include a health record when you print those out. There's a similar feature on the COE view. When we go to COE, you have a COE menu, and you can queue COEs and print or preview the COE. So this is just like what your paper COE would look like, or just filling that in from the data that the recruiter has completed. Let's see. Then we close that, and it's going to ask you if you want to clear that queue. So it's just up to you if you want to clear it or not. If you want to keep the list of COEs that you had, you can say yes or say no. If you want to clear them, you can say yes. Then the last few things that we have here will be under procedures. The most important one that you guys are going to have, but I don't because of the way that I have my installation configured, is upload changes. So you have data on your machine, and the server has data for everybody. So you're going to want to upload changes anytime you're going to work with data. So if you need to enter some data for your kids, some services, you'll enter those, and then you want to be sure at the end of the day you do an upload so that you sync all of your data with the server. Because unless you've done that upload, you're not going to, nobody else is going to be able to see the work that you've done. We do have a few mass procedures. So you can do a mass enroll, a mass withdraw, or a mass SP. And this will let you, enroll a group of students or withdraw a group of students or enter services for a group of students. And it's usually done by at the school level. So you would, for all of the kids in a school, you could enroll or withdraw or enter services for that group of students. To do so, you'll select it and do your search. You want to make sure you have a date in here, enrollment since. It'll limit your search results to only students enrolled after that time. Why don't I choose a school that actually has? So now here are all of the kids. Now, if you want to enroll a kid or enter services for them, you have to mark them in the due column to do that. And any global information that you enter up here, like the enroll date, withdraw date, is going to get assigned to all of the kids that you've indicated in the due column. The grade roll up is going to roll up a grade. So if they're in 11th grade, it'll move them to 12th grade. And then when we do enroll, I haven't entered an enrollment date. I'll do enroll, and it's going to show me a summary of what it's going to do. And I see that it's not actually going to do anything because it's failing on Andrea. So I would need to go back and update some information for Andrea to be able to finish that. So we can just undo changes and back out. So that's a tool that will let you enroll, withdraw, enter services for a group of students at a time. Okay, under procedures, I think that's pretty much everything you're going to use. Upload changes being the most important one. The rest of the things that I have here are more for administrative type things. The record menu is just some keyboard shortcuts. So instead of clicking the plus sign, you could click Control, or you could just use Control A when you're entering data. Instead of using the arrow keys, you can use Control N and Control P. Does anybody have any questions for me? I don't see any questions in the chat, but I'll let you guys have a minute to think about it. If you have any questions for me or for Jose or for anybody else. Gary says most of you can unmute your microphone or use the chat box to ask questions. Is there any way I can only scroll through active students when I use the arrows? Okay, so let's take a look at the student view and our search. So you can create lists of students. And so you can enter all of their ID numbers. You could search for them over here and click Add to List. Or you could search for all of the kids in a district or facility and add those to a list. You can add them one by one using Add to List, or you can click All and add all of them. But when you get a student list, let's add another student here. Let's do a district search. No district. Okay, so we can add to list. So now I have a couple of kids on my list here. I can say use list, and then when I use my arrow buttons, it's only going to scroll through the kids who are in that list. So that's probably the easiest way for you to do that. Just make a list of all the kids that you want to work with and scroll through there. But you do have another option of running a report. So if you have a report that produces the exact list of kids that you want to work with, you can run the report and then you have the same options to add to list or add all students to the list. So you have several different ways to get there, but it all comes down to making a list of students and using that list. Does anybody else have any questions? None yet. I'll give you guys a few more minutes. If you have any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask them, or you can type them in the chat. Jose, was there anything that you wanted to look at or anything that you wanted to share with folks since we have them here? I think we've pretty much covered everything that, we have, or I have, but I'm happy to talk about or look at other things if you have other things you want to talk about.
I think one of the questions that I had, one of the questions that I had is when they are on the student view and they do a search, they have the student list and they want to print out that list and they are not able to. So how can we do that?
If they right click in the grid, they can export to CSV.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be just like reports where you make when you save as a CSV, they can open that up in Excel and do whatever they want to with it.
Great.
So yeah, you can definitely do that. You just come over here. You can do this in most grids in MIS2000. You right click in the grid and export to CSV.
Well, anybody else on any other questions?
Okay. Let's if we don't have any, if there are no other questions, we can wrap up. Or Jose, do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about or look at?
No, go ahead and do a wrap up. That's
All
okay.
right. Well, so y'all, if you run into questions or you have issues with MIS2000, you can reach us at support at msed.com. It's our support email, and that comes to several people, so we can help you with issues. If you have error messages or things like that, you can get in touch with us at support at msed.com. And here's our website. And you can come to support and contacts to find out our information. So you can email us, directly, but if you're having issues, you have an error message or you're having trouble with an upload or something, you're going to want to email us at support@msed.com, because more than one person, monitors that. So you'll likely to get a quicker response there. All right, since nobody's got any questions, y'all are a quiet lot. That's all I've got for you. And so we'll wrap it up. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you, Marcy.
Thanks.